Hello, colleagues! Thank you for coming back on this part 2, which I believe everybody is waiting for so that they can, have a certain reference in order for you guys to decide which one you should invest. Is it really reasonable to buy these things, and will it really protect me from this COVID-19 virus? So without further ado, let's start with the lecture. So let's discuss the challenges this COVID-19 has brought upon us in our dental practice. Number one, social distancing. How can we treat our patient 6 feet away? I mean, it's really impossible. Prior to COVID-19, our distance to our patient when we do our treatment is like as if we wanted to kiss them, right? Second, majority of our treatment deals with aerosol and droplets. So how are we gonna be able to control something that is flying all over the air? Number three, the only person that we can control once we go back to our practice is ourselves. Even if we give strict guidance to our staff, we don't know if they really follow it. And how about our patients? Even if we provide them forms, questionnaires, we cannot control if they will tell us the truth. Just like, the medical staff, the doctors who died because of the patient telling a lie of not traveling abroad. And our main concern, we've been cooped up for almost 2 months now. So how are we gonna be able to recuperate all our losses? Like, for example, even if they say we don't have to pay our rent now while we are in quarantine, and then there can be an installment of our payment, we still have to pay this. So this is really a big loss, and now we have to invest on equipments and materials that, let's be honest, before COVID-19, we don't really think about these equipments to have in our clinic. So this is a battle between economics and health. And then, as I mentioned in part 1, human nature and behavior. Even us, sometimes we do things that will not protect us from this COVID-19. So these are the challenges, and sometimes I read in the Facebook Messenger the post that I would just retire or I will just find another career. So, but that's not the solution, especially for those who really love to practice dentistry, or if practicing this profession is really the only means of their survival to feed their family. This is the only career that they know. So we have to figure out a way on how we can protect ourselves, the staff, and our patients once we go back to practice. So where should it start? It should start from you, okay? From us. So we should provide the best example on how to do and follow infection control once we go back to our practice. Once we go back, and as I mentioned earlier, this is a battle. We are in a war against an invisible enemy. So in part 1, you hopefully, after attending so many webinars, including this, you already know our main enemy. Although there are other viruses and pathogenic bacteria, but right now our main enemy is COVID-19. So the COVID-19 virus, we should use the proper ammunition in order to protect ourselves against this, until vaccines and treatment are finally here, so that it will not be as significant as it is now. Now, what are the solutions in our dental practice? Now, it's not just buying equipments or materials that will provide solutions in order to protect ourselves. What is the number one solution? One, change our habits. Just the simple washing of hands. We are so used to not properly washing our hands or providing real soap in the toilet for everybody to use, including ourselves. So that's a simple habit. But because it's been our habit for such a long time, sometimes we forget to really do it. So now we have to practice ourselves to keep on doing it. Okay? Second is base our decision on what is out there before COVID-19 in terms of the principles of infection control. The problem now is that there's a lot of research coming out, which, as I mentioned earlier, called thesis pandemic. People are, we don't know really who to trust. But something that we can trust are those research that came out before COVID-19. Like a simple thing, face mask. There is a science behind the face mask. So we cannot compromise or put logic to something that is illogical. Like, for example, we can autoclave it. Okay? So we are putting logic into it because our reasoning is that it's okay. It's better to have something than nothing. But I hope you understand that COVID-19 virus and other viruses and other pathogenic bacteria, they don't really care. They don't care what is our reasoning or justification why we don't follow basic protocol. Another is we have to remain logical and calm so that when we make decision, it's not impulsive. However, even if we are logical and calm, we also have to maintain alertness, especially once we go back to practice. We cannot anymore let it be, for things. For example, your assistant is not cleaning the dental chair or your instruments, or you yourself is not doing the basic protocol, then that is something that has to change. Another is you have to make sure that when you buy expensive equipment or disinfectant materials, make sure that there's logic as well on it. Like, for example, there is a basic infection control protocol that every one of us should have been practicing it prior to COVID-19. Now, what happens now is you just have to enhance it. So if you're not practicing infection control before, then I'm sorry to say you will really be in trouble in terms of money because now you have to really buy a lot of stuff. But for those dentists who's been practicing basic infection control before, then you're not supposed to buy so many stuff. You just have to enhance it. Or maybe replace those that needs replacement. And then another solution is arm yourselves with knowledge. Don't just trust everybody else. Whatever you learn from this webinar, you have to find out yourself. I have to provide a disclaimer. I can only suggest to you what I believe or what I think based on the research I've done and based on my experience and based on, the studies I did, but I don't know what is the setup of your clinic. I don't know how you do your practice. So I have no right to dictate to you what you should and shouldn't buy. It's at the end of the day, after this webinar, I hope this guideline of solution that I gave you, this will be your basis whether you should or shouldn't buy a certain material or equipment for enhanced infection control protocol. It is enhanced because we are dealing with an enemy that is highly contagious. Why are we in a very high-risk profession? Because as you can see, and as we've discussed earlier, from an infected patient, whether symptomatic or asymptomatic, tendency is that it can be airborne through droplets and aerosol. It contaminates the surfaces, and then it can be transferred to you direct or indirect contact. So in everything that we do, that's why I mentioned earlier, habits, because our habits will actually make us high risk if we don't correct it. So let's tackle one by one in a scientific way so that you have an understanding before you buy all these things for your clinic. As I mentioned, microorganism, and I guess all living organism has an innate way of protecting itself. Like for example, in pathogenic bacteria, those with spore forming, this creates a spore coat, and it has a cortex which acts as a barrier. So let's just say gram-negative bacteria. These possess an outer membrane, and some disinfectants cannot kill it. Like for example, the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. That's why it lasts longer, because it enables itself from protecting from being killed by certain disinfectants. Now, as I mentioned earlier, for example, the importance of how long you've used your disinfectant solution or your sterilizer to expose this pathogenic bacteria and viruses to these things. You know, like for example, as I mentioned earlier, in alcohol, if you use the alcohol in a very quick way, and the problem with alcohol, it evaporates fast. The tendency, if you place the instrument there like 5 seconds, now it will not do its job in killing these pathogenic bacteria or viruses, because the bacteria or the viruses is not exposed at the duration of time that this disinfectant can actually kill it. And then, like they say, right, when you buy an alcohol, it has to be 60 to 70% isopropyl alcohol, because again, concentration plays a big part on how we are going to kill these viruses and pathogenic bacteria. Okay, so there is a saying, the more concentrated the disinfectant, of course, the greatest its efficacy, and the shorter the time you will need to expose the material you're trying to disinfect or to sterilize. Remember, not all these disinfectants are equal. So some disinfectants works better with this than this, you know. So there's also a problem with high concentrated disinfectants, because these disinfectants might actually damage our instruments. Like for example, our handpieces. We cannot, you know, place them in a disinfecting solution can actually damage our handpieces. So where are we gonna sterilize it properly? Especially if you don't have an autoclave. So are you just, wiping it out with alcohol? So this will not do. Now, as I mentioned, in physical and chemical factors that can affect the effectivity of your disinfectant or sterilizer. Now, of course, the more acidic it is, majority of the time, it is more effective because a lot of pathogens tend to be killed or die if the pH is acidic. Okay, so you have to understand, if we are trying to kill something, you have to understand how to kill it, and you need to use the right ammunition for it. And that is why I am discussing this to you, because by knowing the characteristic of COVID-19 virus, we will be able to buy the right ammunition. So your question of whether do I need this and do I need that, these things will answer this. Okay, now for example, in temperature, okay, now a majority or the activity of most disinfectants increases as the temperature increases. And then if it goes beyond that, sometimes it weakens the disinfectants. Now, what does it mean? For example, if your disinfectant has it states in the instruction, and we have to admit, majority of us don't read manufacturer's instruction. Okay, so let's just say you store your disinfectant in a hot place, okay, or in a colder place, and it's supposed to be room temperature. Then we are damaging the disinfectant to work well in killing the pathogen we're trying to kill. So as simple as that, you have to really, it's part of the habit that we have to learn, which is when we buy a solution or an equipment or a material, we need to read and follow the instruction of the manufacturer. You shouldn't be listening to other people. You should read and follow the instruction given by the actual people who created it. So sometimes we tend to depend so much on our sales agent. Now, I'm not saying your sales agent doesn't know anything. Of course they do, so that they can sell something to you. But the thing is, they don't know everything, and you should be the one who should know it once you buy it, so that it will function well. There are materials that gets damaged when the level of humidity is high, or if the humidity is too low. Okay, so this it gets affected by that. Like, for example, gaseous disinfectants. So we have to be aware of these things, especially when we are trying to store disinfectant solutions or even equipments. Okay? And another thing, water hardness. Now, this has something to do with how we clean our instrument, or sometimes how we what type of water we use when we're trying to sterilize. The best example is autoclave. In autoclave, we need to use distilled water. Okay? And we cannot reuse what we've already used because we think, oh, it's clean because it was placed in the autoclave. That is not true. So this is something that you have to address. Now, as we mentioned, organic matter. So what are the organic matter? This is the serum, blood, pus, fecal, and lubricant material. So when there's, for example, this is important, when if your instrument, isn't rinsed prior to sterilization, the problem with that is that this organic matter might end up protecting the pathogenic bacteria or viruses that is found in your instrument. And so, even if you have a very good disinfectant or a sterilizer, it will not do its function well. Or, for example, we put our instrument, let's just say a single pouch, and then we ended up putting like 20 instruments there, and we don't even rinse it. How can we expect that those instruments will have a high level of sterilization? Then we go to the inorganic contaminants. Again, these things can actually protect the pathogens from dying if we will disinfect them or sterilize them. That's why there is a basic protocol, especially when it comes to instruments, before you sterilize them. Now, as I mentioned, biofilm, even before COVID-19, is one of sources wherein this pathogenic bacteria and viruses ends up being protected. Now, what is exactly biofilm? Biofilm is a group of microorganisms in which it becomes sticky, and they group together and they adhere on the surfaces. Now, as you can see on this part, as I mentioned earlier, biofilm has the capacity to replicate really fast. This biofilm is present ever since prior to COVID-19 in our clinics. And which is the best example where it can be found? It's on the tubing of our high back. It's on the tubing of our handpieces. There's a lot of biofilm there. As you can see, this is the main reason, or one of the reasons, why bacteria gets promoted in the tooth and results to caries. Because as I mentioned earlier, biofilm exists and it multiplies really fast. I want you to see this video because I want you to appreciate what it looks. Because that is the problem when it comes to these pathogenic bacteria and viruses. We don't see them. So when we don't see something, we have this illusion in our head that they don't exist. So see how fast this biofilm reproduces itself. And this can actually result as a shield. Let's just say the sink or your high vac is not properly disinfected, or you ended up buying this extra oral vacuum suction machine. Imagine all this aerosol and droplets that it is being exhausted by this equipment. And then where does it go? It doesn't disappear. It goes somewhere. And wherever it goes, biofilm is created there. So you have to realize that all these equipments that we will be buying will require certain maintenance as well. So as you can see, once it becomes sticky and it forms a film, and if there's a pathogen there, it will get, protected. So until one of them will dislodge itself because, nobody cleans them, nobody bothers them. So, and then they travel somewhere else. So I wanted you to see this one so that you can understand that prior to COVID-19, this already exists in your clinic. So when you go back to your practice, I hope you will be able to appreciate basic infection control. Even if, for example, we are able to finally control or contain this COVID-19. Let's ask now the question of the day. How do we know what we really need? Okay? Or what we need in order for us to practice. Now, first, you have to ask the question, what is it for? Because sometimes we end up buying things without understanding what is it really for. So, for example, in face mask, what is it for? It is not just to cover your face, if that's what you're thinking. And later on, we will discuss that. The second question is, what is the main function of this material or equipment? And as I mentioned, what is the main function of the face mask? Later, I will answer that. The third question, what is the main feature of the material or equipment that's relevant to its function? Okay? The fourth question, what's the maintenance? Actually, this question, sometimes we don't even ask. We are so concentrated of buying something because this one will protect us when we don't even think about how are we going to maintain it. Because maintenance requires energy, time, and money. Then the last question is the cost worth the benefit? And so it starts with our head. Now, typically, even without COVID-19, we should be wearing a head cap or something that will put our hair away from our face and being, placing it on the face of the patient while we're treating. Now, however, prior to COVID-19, majority of dentists rarely wear a head cap. Now, if you will think of the character of COVID-19 virus, it can land into a surface, stay there in a certain amount of time. And when it comes to hair, nobody knows. If we often touch our face and we don't protect our hair, and you do like this, and then you do like that, then COVID-19, since we are treating our patient with aerosol, it can land in our hair if it doesn't have protection. And as I mentioned earlier, we need to answer questions in order for us to decide which material we should use. We have the disposable bouffant cap. In disposable, majority of the head cap is made of a polymer non-woven fabric. And we can also use a plastic head cap, like our shower cap, I guess. And then we have the reusable, which is basically made of cotton. Now, if you will ask me which one of these materials you should be using, in my own personal analysis, it is much better to use a reusable head cap that's made of cotton. Why did I say that? Because what is it for? For the protection of our head. Okay? So that is also the main function so that COVID-19 will not touch our hair. So, when you have to answer the main function that the droplet or the aerosol will not land in our hair, then it means the material we need to use to protect our hair or our head is something that is less porous and less permeable. Because again, from the previous discussion we had, in general, coronavirus particle size is between 65 to 125 nanometer. And COVID-19 is between 70 to 90 nanometer. So, if we will combine all this information and you are wearing something that is permeable or has a lot of the capacity of something to penetrate it because it is porous, then this comes to play of what material we should be using. Now, cotton, which is reusable, is thick. It is not too porous and it's not permeable. So it can actually absorb the aerosol and the droplets that it can come in contact with. Now, the problem there is that although it will not penetrate to go into your hair, how are you going now to change that every patient? And of course, you have to answer the question, what's the maintenance? Now, of course, the advantage of the disposable, once you use it, you just throw it. Now, in reusable, especially with cotton and contaminated material, then it means you have to do the laundry. Okay? And then, what is the cost? The cost now of disposable head cap starts around 50 pesos. Okay? And then for the cotton, of course, much higher because it is cotton and it is washable. So let's just say the initial cost is around 250 or 300. Okay. Now, if you're going to find out the cost, you have to multiplicate the 50 pesos of the disposable times the number of patients that you will be doing it that day, times 2, because you are not the only one who should be wearing a head cap. Your dental assistant must be wearing a head cap as well. So, with the maintenance of the cotton, you need to laundry it. Who is gonna laundry it? Are you gonna bring it home? Or are you gonna clean it, wash it in your clinic? That's why sometimes I advise dentists that if you have enough space and you are willing to invest on a washing machine and dryer, if there's a small unit like that, then it is in order, because at the end of the day, reusable materials becomes cheaper later on because you can reuse it. You don't have to throw it. Now, before, for me, I rather prefer disposable in the head cap because I do not want to worry about washing it. But now, if you're going to choose which will provide you a higher level of protection, then definitely that's cotton. Now, let's go with the eyes. and the skin of our face. Now, in our face in general, the skin in itself, if we will go back again to what we know about COVID, it will not penetrate our skin, but it can penetrate our eyes, nose, and mouth, because that's where the ACE2 receptor, they can go there and into the mucous membrane. Now, again, prior to, if we go back to what I mentioned before, why I discussed it, is that prior to COVID-19, we should be protecting our face because, like for example, HIV, if you're doing surgery and there's blood spatter and it goes to your eyes, then, well, definitely you're gonna have HIV. Now, this is the same with COVID-19. We are dealing with a transmission of aerosol and droplets. And the most sensitive area is the eyes, nose, and mouth. So, as we know, the eye protective wear is a gear to protect our eyes. The face shield is to protect the entire face. Which one we should choose? Now, that is the main function. So what are the features of this PPE? The feature is for the eyewear is to protect our eyes. However, when we are treating, we are moving our head. So this means that the eye protection that you will need is not only in front, but including on the side. So we have two kinds of protective eyewear. The one that we use to protect our eyes when we use LED lights, and the other one are loupes when we need a magnification while we're working on. Okay, so now if you're going to use your loupes for protection, then make sure your loupes has a certain cover on the side. Now, if you're wearing a face shield, then this is normally made of plastic. Since we know all these things, we have to understand that COVID-19, as we've mentioned, can stay on a surface. So this means that even if this eyewear and face shield can protect us while we're doing the treatment, maintenance comes into play. After the patient, what are you going to do about it? You know, for the face shield, now it is disposable. Again, this has cost. Now, if you're just going to use an eyewear or your loupe or your protective gear for your eyes, then again, this is made of plastic. And for the eyewear, it only protects your eyes. How about, the rest of your face? So, and sometimes, like for example, in the loupes, the loupe itself, you cannot just you cannot just put any disinfectant on it. So, if you're using that without the face shield, the aerosol can get into your loupes. So how are you gonna disinfect it now? So that is why, in my opinion, I need to wear an protective eyewear or my loupes if I need one, especially now I'm getting old. So, and at the same time, I will wear a face shield. Why? So that at least the face shield will protect my loupe, so I do not have to put any harsh disinfectant on it to protect it from the aerosol and droplets. And at the same time, I'll be able to clearly see what I'm treating. Okay? And then I don't have to deal with cleaning the plastic because, as we all know, when COVID-19 goes into plastic, it can stay from 5 hours to 3 days. See? So you do not want plastic, you do not want to spend your time cleaning the plastic. So it is much better that you wear a disposable face shield, over your protective eyewear. Because again, if you're not using loupes and you're wearing a plastic eye protection cover, like for example, when you're doing your light cure, now this is plastic. How are you gonna disinfect it? So if you're going to wear that, I suggest on the side of the plastic, so you won't be destroying your protective eyewear from disinfectants, especially like if you use alcohol on it, it will become foggy. So what you do is my suggestion is you wrap it up with Glad wrap. Anything part of the plastic that is exposed without the face shield protecting it. Because as you've learned from a lot of webinars, including what I've said earlier, we are dealing with aerosol. So it can go anywhere and land anywhere. So if your face shield is just covering up to here, then this part where the hook of the eyewear that you're using will be vulnerable to aerosol. Now, it is good if your head cap can also cover that part so that you don't have to wrap it with Glad wrap. So this Glad wrap, once you are doing the maintenance, you just throw it away. Let's go to the always out of stock or very expensive now face mask. Before COVID-19, majority of dentists buy procedural face mask. Even before COVID-19, procedural face mask should be worn only by your dental assistant. But at the time, we couldn't care less. Okay? Now, we go back to the main question. What is it for? The answer of majority of dentists is just to cover the face. I was like that before 18 years ago when I was trained by Sultan. When they asked me to wear my face mask, I put my face mask and it is like this. They started laughing at me. And they said, if you wear your face mask like that, then you're just pretending to be wearing a face mask. It's like you're not wearing anything anyway. So, the face mask is supposedly not only to protect your nose and your mouth and your face, it's supposed to filter. That's the main function of the face mask. Filter the bacteria and the viruses from you inhaling it or for it to go to your mouth, besides preventing your saliva from going to your patient while you're talking. So that is its main function. If you destroy the filter of your face mask, then what is it for? That's the question. Face mask has to filter the virus or the pathogenic bacteria. So, now, since we already know the main function of the face mask is to filter, then when we buy the face mask, we need to know the material or its main feature in order for us to get its benefit. So that's why face masks, there are different kinds and it is based on different characteristic or standard. One is the BFE, which is the bacterial filtration efficiency. So, what does it mean? Okay, it means is how well it filters out the bacteria when challenged with a bacteria containing aerosol. So that is BFE. The second is PFE, which is particulate filtration efficiency, which means it measures how well the mask filters submicron particles with the expectation that viruses will be filtered in a similar manner. The higher the percentage of PFE, the better is the mask efficiency. So, these are the two things that are very important because we now know that the mask is not just to cover your nose and your mouth, but it is to filter pathogenic bacteria and viruses. And since we know that COVID-19 has a size of 70 to 90 nanometer, and that's how small it is, so the PFE must be high. Otherwise, it can penetrate and you can inhale and swallow it and let it go to your lungs and wreak havoc in your body. Besides that, you also need to consider fluid resistance. There should be a level of fluid resistance because again, if your mask is not fluid resistant, the droplet or the aerosol, which is used as a vehicle by a virus like COVID-19, can travel from the mask to your mouth or through your or to your nose. The next is pressure differential. Friends, doctors, colleagues, I am claustrophobic. And the reason why I wear my face mask before like this is because I feel like I'm getting suffocated. But in the end, why wear it when you are not allowing it to function the way it should function, right? So, a long time ago, and that is why I was kind of upset when the company of Sultan got dissolved, I buy their breathability mask. It is the Ease Breathe. It is quite expensive, but I don't particularly care. Because at the time, after I trained with them, I realized how much exposed I'm putting myself into danger every time I treat a patient. And especially now with COVID-19, this is very critical. The next characteristic of the face mask that you should consider before buying is flammability. Why? Because for example, to use an operating room, this has sources of oxygen and there are materials there that fire hazardous. And if your mask is made of a material that is flammable, then you might ended up burning your face. Let's understand better how this face mask is supposed to protect us by filtering pathogenic bacteria and viruses. There is an organization, ASTM. This is the American Standard of Testing and Materials. Let's just say when they test and the size of the bacteria is around 3 microns, okay, the face mask that you need to buy should at least with a low level of protection should be greater 95% filtration. And for this will provide you in a moderate and high barrier. So if you want more protection, then you have to find a BFE of 98, greater than 98%, greater or equal 98%. Now, for PFE, or particulate filtration efficiency, if we are talking about a filtration of the mass of 0.01 micron, for example, like, COVID-19 at between 60 to 70 microns, then you cannot buy a face mask that has a low barrier filtration, like, for example, procedural mask. That's a no-no for you and for your assistant. Therefore, you need to buy a mask that provides greater or equal 98% in PFE. In Delta P, okay, we cannot use greater than 5 because we will end up dying and not being able to breathe. That's why masks with very high Delta P has a breathing apparatus on the side so you don't die with suffocation. Okay? Normally, the ideal Delta P is less than 4 or less than 5 in high risk situation. Okay? Now, COVID-19 is high risk, but we don't really need it if we use other means of protection. So let's go with the fluid resistance to synthetic blood. Now, the unit of pressure used is Hg, which is inch of mercury. So when ASTM specifies testing with synthetic blood at pressures of 80, 120, 160 mmHg to qualify for low, medium, or high fluid resistance. So the value must be either 80, 120, 160. So 80 mmHg is equals to venous pressure. 120 mmHg is equals to arterial pressure. And 160 mmHg correlates to potential high pressure that may occur during trauma or surgery that includes high pressure irrigation, such as when we use our three-way syringe to wash off. That is often seen in restorative and orthodontic procedures. So your face mask, depending on what procedure you are doing, should have a certain fluid resistance to this pressure or splatter. Now again, because of COVID-19, this is very critical. Your face mask must be at least fluid resistant. Unfortunately, because face mask is a difficult material now to easily purchase because, again, of hoarding or unscrupulous business people putting it in a very high price. That is the reason why the use of a face shield now becomes again important. So the next is flammability, which is again in dental should be at least class 1. Let's go with the solutions of how we can address the difficulty of the stocks when it comes to face masks, wherein we wanted to buy, but it is most of the time out of stock. Let's have a test, a fact check about COVID-19. There was this video I saw that there is a do-it-yourself HEPA filter used as a face mask. I saw this that it was even promoted by a doctor to use a HEPA filter from a vacuum cleaner and created it as a face mask. It was done by his wife, because his wife is very much concerned that her husband might contract this COVID-19 virus in New York. So, can you use the HEPA filter of a vacuum cleaner and do-it-yourself face mask? Okay? Well, the answer is no. Because these HEPA filters that are found, so see, colleagues, as I've mentioned, this is promoted by a medical doctor. And that is why don't believe in everything you hear or you read or watch, because at the end of the day, you have to understand the characteristic of the material. Now, HEPA filters used in vacuum cleaner, because its main function is to filter the dirt that goes into the vacuum cleaner. The manufacturer never even thought that this will be used into the face of a person. Probably, you won't die by using it, like, since you're not gonna eat it anyway. But again, we have to consider the fact that this may contain certain chemical and impurities that, as a person, we shouldn't be inhaling. But if you want to risk it, then go ahead. This one I've seen again in YouTube, do it yourself, on how to reuse N95. It is very difficult now to buy, or if you can buy, it's quite expensive. Now, of all the gimmickry and the suggestion of do-it-yourself when it comes to face masks, this is the one that I can consider to be something that we can do. So, the answer is true. Why? Because what it did, in order so that the N95 can be reused, and as we have been talking about, as I mentioned, in the face mask, there should be fluid resistance. That's why these are disposable. Because once it gets wet with our aerosols and droplets and our saliva, the function of how it filters goes down. So the possibility of the N95 still being able to protect you from this COVID-19 that we are all going crazy about will be really low. So this one, so that the N95 can be protected, the person ended up using a cotton fabric and creating a cover for N95. However, again, if you do this, you have to worry now with the cotton cover. But I guess, as I've said, of all the do-it-yourself and possible solutions on how we can prolong this face mask that is so difficult to buy and be sure that it provides the right PFE for us in order that we can reuse them, this is something that at least palatable when it comes to logic. However, you have to consider that you have to also create a lot of this cotton cover for the N95, and you have to do laundry. Okay? Now, another thing that was suggested and I saw, which is, in order that you can reuse the face mask, you can autoclave it or use dry heat. Now, is this true or false? Now, my answer there is definitely false. Okay? Now, this is one of the posts I see in Facebook. When I answer a post in Facebook and I become very direct, it is only on times when I find the post quite alarming. When I saw the post getting spread around, I was so alarmed by this suggestion, because surgical mask, procedural mask, And N95, unless, for example, in N95, the manufacturer states that it is reusable, then again, if you autoclave or you put it in a dry heat to kill the bacteria, the main function of the mask is totally destroyed because you destroyed its filter. So, of all the suggestions that I saw in social network, this is the one that I will tell you, please do not do. There is one compromise that, uh, you can slightly accept, especially in situation wherein face mask is not available or lacking in quantity to be disposed every after patient. And that is, you can wear the N95 for the entire day. However, you cannot remove it, you cannot touch it, it has to stay in your face. Okay, because once you remove it and put it somewhere, then that's something that the N95 has to go. That is the only a little bit that I can probably accept as a compromise, just in case you are in a situation wherein the availability of the face mask is lacking. Now, another is, can you use cotton facial mask to protect yourself? Is that true or false? Again, this is false. Although I suggested earlier as a head cap that is cotton because it is not too porous and permeable, when it comes to the face, okay, and because this is indirect, because in the head it will land only in your hair, okay, and for COVID-19 to transfer and you getting infected will only through indirect contact, meaning you touch your hair and put and use your hands to touch your face, so there's a transference. But when it comes to face mask, wherein it is now protecting the most vulnerable part of your face, which is your nose and your mouth, then I don't suggest that you use cotton during your treatment. Now, this one can be used, for example, by your secretary if they're dealing with patient at a certain distance, or for those people once this quarantine is over and you want to go out and your your household housekeeper or your driver, of course they can wear the cotton face mask because they are not dealing with every hour with aerosol and droplets. So if they wear a cotton face mask and they keep the social distance, then this is acceptable. But for us dentists, this cannot be. Now, this one I saw in one of the posts in Facebook on how to reshape a mask to look like N95, because right now the shape of the face mask must not only, it shouldn't have any space in between of your skin wherein the aerosol or anything that can get into to your nose and your mouth. Now, I find this very interesting. Now, of course, this folding of the face mask will help, especially if you have a face mask with a PFE of greater than or equal to 98%. For example, your surgical mask, you can fold it like that to provide you better protection. Okay? But again, this will not solve anything if you are just going to use a procedural mask. Okay. Okay, so before I discuss this next slide, because it's an interesting and unique invention in regards to face mask, I would just like to put it out there that I am a consultant of Edelweiss Dentistry. Now, I'm discussing this face mask because of its unique technology, wherein it was able to develop a coating on a fabric that neutralizes viruses and bacteria 96%. It is reusable. You can wash it. You can wear it for 50 hours before you can wash it. And then this doesn't have anything to do with the typical filtration of a face mask wherein BFE and PFE are considered, because supposedly the coating of this face mask acts like a typical glycoprotein wherein the virus like COVID-19 thinks that it is ACE2 receptor. So once, for example, an aerosol or a droplet with COVID-19 touches the fabric, it doesn't get inside or be inhaled, not because of the PFE, but because it destroys the coating of COVID-19, thus neutralizing it. Okay, so isn't that interesting? Now, I have not worn this mask, or I do not have that mask yet, but I did order already. Now, there is one time I posted this in one of the social network, and there is one dentist who asked a question about the validity of its science and certification or evidence base. Now, this has been developed at the University Biotechnology of Manchester, and the one who developed this is a biochemist, Professor Sabine Fletch, and it does have a CE certification of Class 2. However, they of course promote it for everyone, not only for healthcare providers. Now, if you're going to ask if it's 100% sure or guaranteed, of course, there's no such thing. Even with sterilization or infection control equipments and disinfection, because precisely the enemy that we are fighting against is invisible. You can further ask about this mask with Dental Domain, because they are the official distributor of Edelweiss. Let's go to another PPE that has been ignored by a lot of dentists when it comes to quality. And the price becomes the first priority. And that is the gloves. In my exposed version 1 lecture, I've always emphasized that if dentist doesn't want to invest on expensive sterilizer, disinfectant solution, at least invest on the face mask and the gloves. The gloves is the main protection, not only for us not to directly touch the saliva and the other stuff in the mouth of your patient and feel icky about it, but it is really to protect us, or it acts as a barrier for the bacteria and the viruses not to get in contact with our hands and then transmitted through our body. There is one particular bacteria, which is MRSA, that if you do not have quality gloves, you can actually transmit from your hands through the gloves, through your patient, or from your patient through your gloves and to you. It is very critical that we choose the quality of the gloves and invest in a good one. There are also people who develop a certain kind of allergy in rubber gloves. That's why they use the nitrile kind. It has to be clear that the powder in the gloves and or the cornstarch powder that we sometimes find in it is not actually the one causing the allergy. This is because during the manufacturing process, this powder can absorb some soluble proteins. And via aerosolization, these powder particles become airborne. Inhalation or direct contact with these powder particles is alleged to bring about allergic reactions. Therefore, it is important to use only gloves with low protein and low powder content, or low protein and powder-free gloves. So, I'm running out of time, so I'll be looking down at my slides, so I will be able to teach quicker because I don't know, I'm really not so, please forgive me, I'm really not so used in doing this. So anyway, doing this webinar thing, it's like, I think my third, and up to now I'm not so used to it because it's very hard to teach and you're just looking at yourself. Okay, so I've been using the word enhance infection control, but actually the proper term is standard infection control, wherein all fluids are considered to be infectious and except sweat, while universal is wherein when there's a presence of blood, it is considered infectious. So right now, it is standard, but I believe we have to upgrade it a little bit more, especially on the slide I mentioned, like our habits, blah, blah, blah. So there is a really difference between disinfection and sterilization. Now, to disinfect is to eliminate most harmful microorganisms. This is what you get to see when you see 99.9 kills germs, like in Lysol. But as I've said, the 0.1% is the one that are really hard to kill, and those are the buggers that will kill you. So again, sterilize is supposedly to really kill those hard microorganisms or pathogens that can cause diseases that cannot be killed by disinfectant. And then the method is basically disinfectant. Majority, they are leading towards chemical, while in sterilization, there are different forms that they use. There's heat, chemical, pressure, filtration, and radiation. Now, the types is also different because, again, as I mentioned earlier in the previous slides, there are differences in terms of concentration, duration of time, and other stuff. And then, of course, the application is that the disinfection is to mostly decontaminate the surfaces and air, while sterilization is for food, medicine, and surgical instruments. Okay, now next is there are two types of sterilization. One is the physical method, and the other is the chemical method. So let's go over each of these method. Okay, in the physical method, there is dry heat. Okay, so we can flame it, we can use hot air, oven, which is dry heat sterilization. And then in flaming, we used to do that in instrument, especially when we're doing endo. And then in hot air oven, this is like the glass bead sterilizer. Again, this is very useful, especially if you need a quick way of sterilizing an instrument. Okay, now there's another is the moist heat. Like for example, pasteurization, which is used to sterilize milk, and then of course boiling. Boiling is the use of 20% sodium bicarbonate water. And the most popular in medical facilities, including dental facilities, is the steaming, which is autoclave. Okay, so the steam sterilization, which is what I'm going to tackle more, because this is the most important part in right now. Steam sterilization requires direct contact between the saturated steam and every surface of the instrument. So it means the autoclave or steam sterilization will work well if only if there's direct contact to the instrument you are trying to autoclave. And that is the reason why bunching up all these instruments in one pouch so that we can save the pouch will not work, or putting so many pouches in one cycle of autoclaving will also not work. So again, and we have instruments, there are different types on which instruments can be sterilized on a specific autoclave. The autoclave, although it kills and is very dependable, evidence-based to sterilize all our instruments, it is still not 100%. Why? Because one, due to human error or not following instruction, and sometimes again, autoclave has its own maintenance. That's why there's a data that it releases that shows you whether the autoclave is working properly. These are the different types of autoclave. We have the Class N, which is the most common globally, especially here in the Philippines, Class S, and Class B. Now, of course, the Class B uses vacuum. The Type N cycle is a non-vacuum kind of sterilization. Class N has a lot of limitations. The instruments are better unwrapped when you autoclave with Class N. And the disadvantage of this is once you open the door of the autoclave, then your instruments are not anymore fully sterilized because your environment and your air is not sterile. So this is what's good between in Class B and Class S. Now, because you can wrap the instruments and it's really one of the highest percent type of autoclave that can truly sterilize almost everything. Although, again, there's no guarantee in any disinfection or sterilization. Now, if you do not have much of a budget, this is one of the things that I will recommend that you invest on. You have to change your Class N autoclave already, because that's almost not acceptable anymore in medical and dental facilities abroad. Now, you are saying we are a poor country, blah, 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 but autoclave is something that, like the dental chair, is something that we need in the dental clinic with or without COVID. And because Class B is so expensive, you can probably invest at the middle, which is Class S. Now, of course, the next is the use of the gas plasma. Now, the plasma is everywhere. It is actually considered as the fourth state of matter. Okay, and of course, this is considered as a good alternative for autoclave. According to studies, gas plasma can be used in a lot of treatments in dentistry. And supposedly, it is cheaper, shorter period of time of sterilization, and it is not as, because sometimes autoclave can corrode certain materials, but with gas plasma, it supposedly uh, has a lesser chance of doing this. Now, again, you can use this as an alternative, but there's no yet full evidence that it really works. So there are already manufacturers selling this, but it is not as evidence-based as an autoclave. Now, of course, if you like to boil things to make it even cheaper, fine. But I will recommend tindilization, meaning boiling for 20 minutes, cooling it, and then reboiling, and then cooling it again 3 times. If that is what you really need to do because you don't have an autoclave, this is the, the cheapest way of sterilizing. So not just boiling it once, but you boil it 3 times every 20 minutes. And then, of course, the use of the dry heat method. But again, all these methods, nothing can compare when it comes to the steam or autoclave. Now, let's go to the next type of sterilization, which is radiation. This is ionizing using alpha rays, beta rays, gamma rays, and X-ray. And the non-ionizing, which is the UV rays, which is getting very popular nowadays. Okay. The UV rays are used to entryways before for operation and laboratory area. And honestly, this is quite controversial because some claims or study claims that the use of UV rays is more as a disinfectant rather than sterilization. But since UVGI or ultraviolet germicidal irradiation or UVC light has been used for quite a long time, even in the dental industry. Now, as you know, for better understanding, UV or ultraviolet radiation is like similar to what we get from the sun. That's why we use sunblock. And by the way, we have a video on how to properly use sunblock. So, your skin will age slowly. Okay, so you have to place that every morning. Okay, so anyway, and now the short wave, there's an A and a B that penetrates the skin. Now the short wavelength, which is the UVC that comes from the sun, doesn't really able to penetrate beyond the ozone layer because it gets trapped in there. Okay, so although it has a short wavelength, it is the most damaging UV radiation. So thank goodness it gets filtered in the atmosphere, and that is the reason why environmentalists are afraid that we are destroying the ozone layer, that later on UVC rays coming from the sun might be able now to penetrate the earth. However, because of this UVC that is man-made, okay, the wavelength of the UV radiation ranges from 328 nanometer to 210 nanometer. At its maximum bactericidal effect occurs at 240 to 280 nanometer. Now, it uses two types of bulbs. The mercury UV bulb, which primarily emit light at 254 nanometers, while the pulse xenon UV bulb emit UV light at several different germicidal wavelengths. Now, basically, the UVC effectiveness is influenced by what I have mentioned earlier. Again, organic matter, wavelength, type of suspension, temperature, the type of microorganism we are trying to kill, and the UV intensity. Now, in my own personal opinion, based on what I read about UVGI and UVC, I think this is a very good type of investment that we can use in conjunction to disinfecting our dental clinics. One, it saves time. Second, it has a lot of research already that it works. However, as I've said, there is is still a discussion whether it can be considered as sterilization or just simply disinfection. But for me, I feel that if you have a clinic that serves a lot of patients, then I think the best way to do is clean all the surfaces first and then run this UVGI or UVC. Now, when you buy this, make sure that you understand how big your room is, because again, just like the autoclave, the light has to have a direct contact to the surface for it to really work. So the nooks and crannies will not be sterilized or disinfected. So you have to make sure that you still have a disinfectant solution to deal with these small areas that the UVC or the UVGI cannot reach. So, however, what is nice about this is that if your clinic is very busy with patient, the disinfecting of the space is very fast. So, it depends on what unit you're going to buy. However, please be very careful on whom you buy this, because again, there are a lot of unscrupulous business people who might be selling you supposedly a UVC light, but actually it is just a violet light. Okay, so make sure that the distributor you're buying it from is dependable, and try to research first about the brand. These are the things you cannot cut corners when it comes to cost, because again, the UVC and the UVGI prior to COVID-19, some believes in it, others don't. So although like later on, another equipment that I've been often asked if it's necessary to buy is similar to this. But with UVC, I think it's worth the investment as long as you know the distributor and the brand is dependable. Please do not depend, I'm sorry to say, but it is very scary to buy made in China equipments because for me, ever since, even before COVID, it has nothing to do with China or whatever, but because of the dependability on how they manufacture equipments and materials. So by experience, personally, okay, I'm not saying every made in China is bad, but by experience, when it comes to equipment, I rarely buy now made in China because I had a very, very bad experience about it. So, since this light is being used as a disinfectant or to kill COVID-19, if you buy something that doesn't work, then you just wasted a whole lot of money, plus it might end up killing you because you're trying to save some change. Okay, then the next is filtration. Filtration is basically a sterilization of liquid, serum, plasma solution, vaccines, and antibiotics. Again, filtration used to be not so popular when it comes to sterilization, but recently there's a lot of discussions about it, like all these HEPA filters that are going on that supposedly will provide protection for us. So there's a lot of question about having a negative pressure room. Okay, so this is normally the ICU in hospitals normally has these kinds of room that supposedly the air is clean or gets filtered. Okay, now based on the studies by one of the pioneer designer of hospital rooms like this, okay, in the United States, okay, negative pressure works. However, again, like UVC and UVGI, there's a certain limitation as well, because what the negative pressure does is that it removes the air outside the room. Okay, so it's like a one big vacuum, generally speaking. So it sucks the air through the gap under the door to the hallway or outside. And that means it's sucking the air from a common space, meaning the air entering the room isn't designed to be sterile. So there's an exhaust fan now often located at the bathroom that will eject the diseased air in the room to the outside. Now, however, the challenge about this is that if the room, in order for the rooms to maintain negative pressure, the windows cannot be opened, the doors closes automatically. But most of all these rooms need to spit out 30% to 40% more air than they are taking. So there is only a one-way flow of air. So again, you have to ask yourself certain issues. Where do you get now the clean air? And then the hard part is there are areas that it becomes a challenge. For example, the fire exit and areas that cannot be totally included in making it the environment totally clean, like the socket and the ceiling, because there are nooks and crannies there. Let's not go extend in going through a negative pressure room, because it's really not necessary. So these uses HEPA filters, okay, that can scrub the air when full exhaust isn't possible. So that means that this room will be pressurized but will ultimately recirculate some of the air. Since the air is filtered, though, it should be safer than if it isn't. So that's what I'm saying. It's better to have this than nothing at all. But at the end of the day, as I've said, all the methods of sterilization and disinfection is never 100% guaranteed. Okay, now let's go to the HEPA filters, which again is very popular in social media and being discussed back and forth if we really need to have this. Now, again, it is a matter of choice for you. Of course, the HEPA filters are high efficiency particulate air, also known as high efficiency particulate absorbing and high efficiency particulate arrestants. Now, according to the Institute of Environment, Science, and Technology, with regards to performance, there are different kinds of HEPA filters. Now, how do you know what to buy if you want to buy? The key thing is to make sure what you're buying has a genuine HEPA filtration. Okay? That means that 99.97% of particles at 0.3 microns is often described as a true HEPA or absolute HEPA by checking the particulate size quoted by the manufacturer. So the particulate size must be 0.3 microns. That's how much they can filter in terms of the size of the pathogen or bacteria or microorganism floating around. Okay, so some professional grade vacuums will have extra mechanism for dealing with particles even smaller than zero point 0.3 microns, such as activated carbon granules. Finally, if you need this type of thing and you don't have money to do it, well, there is a do it yourself by using an old electric fan, a square electric fan. Now, again, this do it yourself, that is it is not as less than 100, even less than probably 60% of how it filters. But again, if your attitude is not changing into it's okay, then I cannot stop you from doing this. But of course, having HEPA filters will work, but it will not, again, totally and surely secure you from not contracting COVID-19. So for me, it's okay if you want to buy, if you have the money to buy. Okay, so the next is these boxes that I get to see in social media, wherein it is placed over the head of the patient so that all this aerosol will go to these boxes. Now, well, it is ingenious, but for me, the thing is, who will clean it again? What will be its maintenance? Because as we've said, the COVID-19 stays really long in plastic. So every time you used something, it means there is maintenance. It means there are consumables that you're going to use, and it means an added time for you to do all these things. So it's up to you if you consider this, something that you want to do in your clinic. But for me, as I've said, that's why I took longer in explaining PPEs, because that's the most important part in fighting COVID-19. And then if every of your machine is working well, then the chances of you contracting it every step of the way gets lower and lower. So what is the chemical method? And then chemical method is, of course, solutions that we used as a sterilizer. And also, again, as I've said, cleaning is very important. There are chemical sterilization that is not so good to inhale, and others is that it can actually sometimes damage our instruments. So in chemical sterilization, ethylene oxide, or ETO, is the most commonly used for chemical sterilization due to its low boiling point at 10.4 centigrade at atmospheric pressure. Now, again, bleach, glutaraldehyde, formaldehyde solution, we are all familiar of this. There are lists that are sent, like, for example, in glutaraldehyde, it became so popular a long way back. But the problem is that it damages the metal alloys of our instrument and burst. Okay, so, but chemical sterilization, as long as you allow the instrument or the surface, again, with the proper duration of time, direct contact, and proper concentration, it works very well. Like, for example, alcohol, which became out of stock and in the entire period of COVID-19. Now, but as I've said, in alcohol, there has to be a contact time of 20 minutes and a concentration between at least 70% to make it effective. So, as the alcohol is, again, one of its disadvantage is that it evaporates really fast. So to achieve the 20% contact time is quite difficult unless you seal the container and make sure that it cannot evaporate. Okay. So however, there's a lot of uses of alcohol, especially for quick disinfection. Now again, glutaraldehyde is a very good disinfectant uh, for a long time, as I've mentioned. But the problem of this is, again, it is not so good in our health. Okay. Also, this requires a soaking time of, now we are talking about just 10 minutes exposure in an endoscope disinfection, but in dentistry, we need to sterilize our instrument at least a minimum of 10 to 12 hours. Now, it is not that expensive. That is what's good about it. It is also effective. But the problem with glutaraldehyde, as I mentioned, is that it takes a longer period of time for the materials to get sterilized, at least 10 to 12 hours. So if you only have one instrument that you like to use, and you are using glutaraldehyde, you have to appoint your patient the following day. So, and plus it destroys metal alloy, as I've mentioned. So phenols are considered a low-level disinfectant, and it is also the oldest known disinfectant. Okay, and the contact time must be 10 minutes at 20 degrees centigrade. Now, again, the problem with the phenols is that they are absorbed by porous material, and their residual can actually cause irritation. Now, that is the reason why it also damages certain surfaces that are porous. Okay, so this one is getting popular as well, which is the quaternary ammonium compounds. This is again similar to phenols, but which is a low level of disinfectant to clean surfaces. Now, it is commonly used in small concentration in after dinner skin wipes. This is normally what they used for wipes or medical grade wipes. And also, like for example, the Clorox wipes. But again, it depends on the concentration that is placed. For example, the safe concentration is 0.5%. And normally, this is the disinfectant used by cosmetic industries because it is safe at 0.02%. So in the eye area. So this you can have in your clinic. You just have to find a good brand that provided this. Another is the quaternary amine solution. Now, this is the quaternary ammonium compounds with low concentration of alcohol. So this one has a low base alcohol effect, and this is also seen in certain wipes that they will tell you alcohol base. Okay, so next is OPA or OPA. Now I will not pronounce the P, what P stands for, because it's very hard to pronounce. But this is a high-level disinfectant suitable for reprocessing clean, heat-sensitive, semi-critical medical and dental devices. So, it is reused for a maximum of 14 days and should be monitored using the solution test strips. Now, again, this is a good alternative for glutaraldehyde. Now, however, the problem is you have to make sure that, like glutaraldehyde, you have to replace the solution and not make use of it for 30 days because it's not gonna be effective. Now, the advantage of this, it has a wide pH range and it is not as irritating as the glutaraldehyde. However, it does stains the skin and the surface, and sometimes it is costly than glutaraldehyde. But between glutaraldehyde and OPA, I much prefer OPA. Now, in formaldehyde, again, this is a very strong disinfectant. And the problem here is that it is very irritating to the eyes and the respiratory tract. So the next is chlorine. Now, chlorine is the most popular is sodium hypochlorite, which again is very good in the concentration or cleaning the water lines. Now, when you use chlorine, diffusion and contact time is 1:10 or 10% solution, 10 to 15 minutes exposure. The iodines, the dilution and contact time is 1% and 10 minutes exposure, while the peroxide, which is hydrogen peroxide, hyperox, etc., the contact time is 20 minutes. Only 5 to 10 minutes is needed for a 1% dilution of Virkon. So, chlorine is very good in cleaning the, like for example, let's just say you don't want to buy, branded disinfectants to clean your tubings and your drainage and your bathroom. The high vac that we use to get all this aerosol and droplets that comes when we are having the treatment. Okay, so again, the disadvantage of this is that the solution is very unstable. That is the reason why you cannot pre-mix it and use it later. Okay, so it has to be always done fresh. Let's go to the disinfectants. Now, as I've said, the disinfectants is almost like similar to sterilization, except that it doesn't totally kills all the microorganisms, especially those with spore-forming characteristics. So, of course, we have the Lysol that, the contact time has to be 10 minutes and it is used as triethylene glycol. And then there's also Glade, and these are things that you can actually buy in the grocery. Okay, and then we have the thermal washer and disinfection. And you will see later how it looks like. It looks like a dishwasher. And what it does is that it already cleans, rinses, and disinfects the instrument. Now, it is really quite expensive. So, I don't think you would like to buy it. Even unless I have really a big practice and earning a lot of money, that I won't mind, spending extra on such an expensive equipment. However, of course, in Europe or developed countries, this is not a expensive equipment for them. Okay, so because they get to charge their patient really high. We finished now the clinical environment on how to protect it. Now we're going to how protect our equipments and tools. This is very critical, our compressor. Majority of practitioners in the Philippines use industrial compressor. Sometimes they think that a silent type is better than the ordinary noisy compressor. Well, it's just the noise that is gone with the silent type, but the makeup, unless the tank is stainless steel, then it will still rust and especially if you place your compressor near, for example, like me, my error when I first started, I stored my compressor in a cabinet near the sink, where there's a lot of humidity and moist. So it vacuums the moist and became water inside the tank. And because before nobody told me that the compressor is required to be drained at least twice a day, yeah, depending on the load of your patient, then all this water stood still inside the tank of the compressor. And at the end, it became rusty and all the bacteria is probably there, and it's really gross. And I've only learned how to do it properly when, as I've said, I was trained in Sultan and of course Alphaden. So the thing that I did before in order to drain it is I bought a pump in Shoemart or in a drugs in SM. Shows how old I am. I still call it Shoemart. Okay. So anyway, a good friend of mine, Dr. Clayton, set it up for me, wherein he placed a hose and there is a pressure that is built that all I have to do is get a pail and drain the water twice a day from the compressor. And then also I have changed the location where it is stored. And then when I finally had another clinic, we had a dental compressor and a backup wherein, again, Dr. Clayton was so nice to provide me the requirements to have a certain modified industrial compressor, because I know dental compressors are very expensive. It starts around 300 to half a million pesos. So it's a no-brainer that majority of dentists here uses industrial compressor, because we also don't charge high to our patients, unlike the dentists in developed countries, where when they can charge, sky's the limit due to insurance. So anyway, if you're going to repurpose an industrial compressor, you can go to Manila and you just have to buy the ordinary industrial compressor. Just make sure that it has 2 horsepower per dental chair. So you have to tell them to change the tank and have you built a stainless steel tank so that it won't get rusty. And then they have to place or install 3 air filters. Okay, 3 air filters, and also a desiccant dryer, and of course, again, on how to drain it properly, so you can have this pre-designed, and as I've said, at least 2 horsepower, so that when you run your handpieces and high vac and salivary ejector all at the same time, it will work at the right power. And then, if possible, get oil-free and silent type. Now, when we had this built for the clinic, it cost us around 88,000, and that was like 8 years ago. But it was worth it in comparison, of course, to the $500,000 dental compressor that right now we don't have much cash due to not working for more than 2 months already. So next is you have to make sure that the operating area is very clean, and this is again basic infection control procedure. You have to remove all of the PPEs that you've used during the treatment, because of course this will cause to cross-contamination. So has to be new face mask, has to be, and then because this video was done pre-COVID days. So the assistant is just wearing a ordinary scrub suit. But now that it is enhanced because we are dealing with an infectious disease, then the person has to be in a surgical scrub so that your assistant will also be safe while cleaning the area. And of course, the products that you get to see on the right side are majority of the products that I used because as I've said, I used to be a consultant of dental domain. And one of my favorite disinfectant that they have is the Unisepta wipes. It is a medical grade wipes that I can use like for example in the dental chair, and it doesn't damage the leather. And I also bring one with me everywhere, so that outside the dental clinic. So however, unfortunately, because of the situation, all of their stocks are gone. So just make sure you clean everything first. You have to clean everything first to remove all the things that may result for these bacteria and viruses not to die with the use of your disinfectant, because they get to have this protective shield like the biofilm and organic and inorganic matter. Okay? So clean it well. And also, you have to start from least to the worst when it comes to your dental chair. If you start with the worst, you have to really throw out all the disposable wipes that you are using to clean it up. The hand pieces, the drainage of the tubings, and the cuspidor, I do it last. So, and then the cuspidor is the last because that's where I normally drain all the dirt, like the fluids that came from the hand pieces and the salivary ejector. And then I throw it out, and then of course I use Vacucid, which is a disinfecting solution precisely for this tubing, so that all the biofilms can be drained. Now again, you have to be careful of these biofilms because these are the ones that can protect the pathogens from staying longer than they should, including COVID-19. So before, I just use Vacucid before I close the clinic, but now, precisely due to COVID-19, well, we have to probably do it in between patients. So because this is an infectious disease, so we have to follow the protocol now for infectious diseases, not anymore the regular ones. And now we are going to deal with the oral environment. As we are dealing with aerosol and droplets when it comes to the transmission of COVID-19, we try to make sure that anything that deals with water, as much as possible, it is disinfected, or as much as we can control its sterility, or we are able to remove as much of pathogens and biofilm as to where all our water is passing through. Now, the main problem in our practice is that we need water in our handpieces and in our ultrasonic scaters. So, these majorly used water. So, in order to minimize the chances of aerosol, if you would like, actually this is a very good long-term investment with or without COVID, because the system can be controlled, and plus you can use distilled water, which is clean water. And if you use a rubber dam and your high vac is functioning well, so these are normal equipments that we used in our daily practice even without COVID. So we do not have to buy other stuff. This is a tissue dispenser, and it runs with electric hand pieces. And what is nice about that is that it doesn't depend on a compressor. And then you can control the speed, a high, low speed, and you have a separate water line that ensures that whatever water that comes out of it is really clean, unlike the industrial compressors that we use and we let our patients swallow all those dirt and grime found in the tank. So this is a very good, for me, a much more acceptable investment if I'm just gonna spend money anyway. So if you can shift from air motor handpieces, you can go to an electric motor handpieces, and then, or bisa air driven, because the air driven just really spread aerosols. And another thing before I forget, the tubings where our handpieces are attached, this really needs to be replaced at least every 5 years. And the tubings that drains the from the cuspidor and the high back and salivary ejector, at least every 10 years. And you need to really run a disinfectant at least, before you can already swallow once a week, but now it's really every day. So this is a good alternative. Another thing is you can get a machine that purifies the water. But of course, all of this water requires, if it becomes aerosol and during the treatment, it really needs the help of the high back and the rubber dam, so that you can control the exposure of CFU in terms of the amount of organisms that are being spread through aerosol. So that is the clean water lines. Okay, so now we are dealing with how to maintain our instruments. And as you can see, there's a lot of things that is wrong here, like this one. This is definitely wrong, and this one too. If you don't know that it is what's wrong with it, then we really have a big problem. And this one as well is very wrong. So normally in the Philippines, we don't have two assistants like in developed and rich countries. We only have one assistant, or just no assistant. So anyway, it is very important that even without COVID-19, the proper protocol in cleaning the dental area or operating area is for the assistant or you, before you clean, to really throw out first all the PPEs that you've used during the treatment. Because sometimes I've seen, a lot of dentists or assistant use what's already dirty, and then they're trying to clean the dental chair and and all the instruments handling them, this results to cross-contamination. And plus, it will really endanger you as well, especially in COVID days. So what you need is that your assistant or you needs to replace all the PPEs into a new one, which is actually really basic, and then set aside all the instrument that needs to be cleaned, disinfect, and sterilized. All the dangerous or hazardous materials and consumable must be thrown in the proper waste can, and then the disposables that are not too dangerous can be disposed now in the trash can. And then now for the instruments, it is very important that you soak it with a disinfecting solution that can remove all this organic and inorganic matter, especially attached on the curvatures of the instruments. So you pre-soak it. This is very important because all of the procedures prior to sterilization is very critical, because if you don't do this, no matter how great is your sterilizer or autoclave, it will not work. So what you're gonna do is you soak it, and then you follow all the manufacturer's instruction. So your assistant, or whoever is doing this, needs to read the instruction of all the materials that you are using as a disinfectant and materials that you are using for sterilization. What you're gonna do is, after you are able to clean the instrument, now by the way, before you don all your PPEs and prior to cleaning, you have to wash your hands, and then when you put on your gloves, do not forget to sanitize it with hand sanitizer. And then after that, once the instrument are soaking, I really suggest the use of ultrasonic cleaner, this one, for cleaning, because this is more effective rather than manually done with the brush. But you can do that as well if you're trying to save some money. That's okay. But as I've said, these are basic infection control protocol, and these are needed now more than ever. So of course, the ultrasonic cleaner, you need to place the right solution for it. Do not use any other solution that is not suggested by the manufacturer, because this might damage your ultrasonic cleaner. And then of course, you have to test it or degast it at least once a week, to check if the ultrasonic cleaner is really working well. And that is with the use of a stick, like a barbecue stick, and you just get a Reynolds foil, and then you just wrap it tight, the edge of the foil, you place it on the stick, and then you do that like 3 or 4 sticks, and then allow the ultrasonic cleaner to run, again according to the manufacturer's instruction. So for this, it's 5 minutes. And so if you remove the foil, it should have this kind of pitted and wrinkled pattern. Otherwise, if it doesn't have it, it's not working well. So again, the steps for cleaning is, of course, pre-soaking it, and then you rinse it, and then you clean it either manually or ultrasonic cleaner. And then after that, or there's another way, which is a more expensive way. It is called the thermal washer, as I mentioned earlier. And so this, you don't have to do this, but you don't have to buy that. But if you have the money, why not? It makes life easier. That's the reason why we work so hard to have money to spend to make our life easier. Don't you think so? So anyway, if your autoclave is class N, this is the steel cassette that you can use to autoclave your instruments. Because as I mentioned, when it comes to class N, it is better that the instruments are unwrapped. Unfortunately, if the instruments are unwrapped, once you open the autoclave, it is not sterile anymore because your air and your environment is not sterile. That's why I do suggest that if you have a UV light for storage area, like this one, a UV storage place, then it can help in, again, at least whatever airborne microorganisms or pathogens that are existing in the air. Hopefully that's not COVID-19. Okay, so when it comes to dental handpieces, it depends on the brand that you use. For W&H, it is better that you remove the burrs after using it and run it for at least 20 seconds to 1 minute for me, because they want all the dirt and grime that passes through from in the dental handpiece, from the tubing to the from the compressor tubing and the handpiece, to be removed. And then the other thing is, for NSK, it is much better with the burrs in it. It is because they have a different design when it comes to rotor. Now, another thing is that you have to use wipes to clean the body of the handpiece. Now, this one is before soaking. And of course, lubricate it prior to placing it in the autoclave. Now, again, there's also a way for you to soak a handpiece. Okay. Now, this one is, when it comes to surgical handpiece, especially surgical handpieces, you really need to clean inside out because of bloodborne. It's a bloodborne pathogen. It is considered immediately that requires cleaning it. So when you buy, like for example, you use W&H because that's the handpiece brand I use. Then it is much better that you ask your sales agent or their consultant on how to dismantle these handpieces. So that's how you run it with water. There you go. And then if you have a lot of handpieces and you have a lot of dental chair, then the best one is, you can buy their automatic handpiece cleaner, which is called Assistina. Now, this is how you clean the handpiece. You can also use this scrubber to remove the grime. But again, may I remind everyone that, yes, here, this is how you disinfect it. So you have to disinfect it all the time before you autoclave it. And please do not use chlorine, phenols, and acids because this can damage your handpiece. So you do not soak it, okay, to water or any chemical disinfectants. And then always, again, read the instruction of the manufacturer. Now, when you're trying to lubricate it, please make sure that what oil you are using is the manufacturer's recommendation. Because sometimes, a long time ago when I was starting in my practice, I used to lubricate my handpiece with this motor oil. And that is not good because it gets baked when you autoclave the handpiece and it destroys the rotor and totally damage your handpiece. It will cost you more than just buying the real lubricant for handpieces. And then, may I suggest that if you're still using a 2-hole handpieces, you can upgrade it into 4 holes because with the 2-hole, it doesn't have exhaust. This one. Now, that is the reason why your gloves turns into yellowish brown color while drilling, because all the dirt that is coming from your handpiece ends up going to your gloves, ends up going to the mouth of your patient. So again, our patient is paying us to, to provide them the proper treatment. Okay, so then after cleaning, disinfecting the handpiece, you have to lubricate it, and this is how you should lubricate it properly so that your handpiece will last longer. So you have to use the right nozzle and then straight up the oil, not on incline, and then without the burr, and then sprit oil into the handpiece and you will see the dirt coming out from it. So after you lubricate your handpiece, then that's the time you autoclave it. And this is the proper storage for it. So it upside down so that the oil will, trickle down. But this is also another thing. May I remind everyone that when it comes to the handpieces, if the burrs get stuck into it, do not force to take it out, because you might just damage the rotor, and that is more expensive than just calling your distributor and have it removed for you. Now, a lot of people has been asking me about this high volume evacuator. Now, especially this one, the extra oral, okay? Now, honestly speaking, if you have extra money and you want extra protection, fine, go ahead and you can buy this. But for me, it is not really necessary, because one of my issues on this, because study says it helps, but it doesn't provide you a higher confirmation that it totally eradicates aerosol situation. Now, because my opinion in this is, once all the aerosol it sucks goes through this area, you again need to maintain this. You need to clean this, because this area where the aerosol passes through are contaminated. So that is extra work for you. Plus, there is also consumables, which are filters. You cannot allow the filter not to properly work. Otherwise, you wasted money on investing on such equipment. So, for me, if you cannot maintain it, and you don't have extra money, this is something I will not say you should buy. Okay. Now, what do you really need to buy? This one, the high vac tips that are disposable, and it's been around and it's not expensive. Now, what is expensive is that if your power that's coming from your compressor is not giving the right horsepower to provide a good high volume evacuation for aerosols and droplets. That is actually the main problem. If you have a good high vac, let's just say your compressor, because honestly speaking, let's put it this way, even before COVID-19, your compressor must at least have 2 horsepower for one dental chair. The 2 horsepower will allow the dental chair to work properly, wherein your high-speed handpieces and your salivary ejector plus your high vac will be able to work properly at its optimum level all at the same time. Unfortunately, we keep on getting free compressors when we buy our dental chair. And normally, what they give you is only half horsepower. And if that is the case, your handpieces is not even running properly, and definitely when it runs along with your salivary ejector and your high vac, then all of them are not working properly. So in the end, if your high vac is giving the right power, this is much more effective than this one. If in case, you don't want to buy a compressor, then buy a separate high vac system. This is a lot better. Before even the water becomes aerosol or the droplets become droplets, if your assistant is very precise and well trained, then and you are wearing the right proper PPEs, then whatever aerosol is going somewhere, you're going to clean it anyway in between patients. So again, in my opinion, this is really not necessary. unless, you have extra money and you feel that it is much better that you buy that than improve your compressor, the horsepower of your compressor, or your high vac system that we normally use every time. Now, along with the high vac that we use all the time, the thing that it can help is the use of rubber dam. So that's what I'm saying. You combine the rubber dam, you isolate. So the only thing that is exposed is the tooth you are treating. So, and if there's a salivary ejector inside and the high vac is sucking all the water that is coming from your handpieces and from, the drills or the materials coming from the infected tooth, then all of these things can be handled by a high-powered high vac. You don't need to have an extra oral one. So, this will save you money. You just use a good rubber dam. Now, before, you can combine this. But nowadays, because of COVID-19, this is much better with the light. Well, in case that you're not doing, highly powered, high-powered generating aerosol procedures. But if you do, like for example, restorations, then a rubber dam is a must. For example, in terms of prophylaxis, then this is good enough. But you need to have a high vac there, and as much as possible, do manual during COVID days, and just just use the ultrasonic scaler for really difficult to remove calcular deposits. So, I know a lot of people don't like rubber dam because it is very hard to place or the discomfort with the patient is high. But honestly speaking, this will help a lot in preventing a contaminated aerosol or droplets while you're treating your patient. Besides, in endodontics, this is a must. So, just simple. You just punch the rubber dam with the guide, then place and fit the clamp. And then place a floss, and this will be your guide. So I find this very easy to do, and this is the reason why I don't mind using rubber dam anymore. So you just use your cotton plier to go inside to the hole, take out the, clamp the floss that is binded or around the clamp, and so pull the floss to the other side, and so you have a guide now, and voila, you just stretch the rubber dam and it is now properly isolated. Now for me, this is my favorite frame because it is very flexible. I do not have to remove the frame. It is bendable, and it is from Ultradent. So for me, that is my answer to most of the question I've asked, whether an extra oral high vac is necessary. For me, it's really not. Okay, but as I've said, if you have extra money, go ahead and purchase one. But just make sure you properly do the infection control for that and do the maintenance as well. Thank you, thank you. It's finally over. I'm so happy that you were all able to join me and our group at the DMD Center in cooperation with Facial Value. Now, I really appreciate that a lot of dentists registered for this event, and hopefully, I was able to provide you all the information you need to go back to your practice, and at the same time, didn't get to fall asleep. It's taking it's kind of hard to lecture in front of the camera for me because I really prefer the interaction of the audience. Now, before you go, I have certain announcements to make. We will have another webinar for DMD Center in tentatively on June 14, and this time around it's about aesthetics, the Edelweiss dentistry system. So this is in cooperation with Dental Domain, and I hope I will get to see all your names again there during the webinar if you're not too busy going back to your practice by that time. And definitely the thing that I will teach there will provide you a lesser way of doing restoration and not too much aerosol. Okay. And another thing is that I would just like to inform you that Facial Value is a YouTube channel. It has nothing to do about dentistry, but has something to do, as I mentioned in my introduction, in aging well. And I will really truly be grateful if you can support that channel and visit it. And if you like it, please do subscribe. We need as much subscribers as we can. Okay. And then, of course, I would like to thank uh, the group of DMD Center and Facial Value who have worked tirelessly in order to deliver this event to everyone. So again, thank you so much, and please do not hesitate to send me a message if you have any other questions from what you've learned on this webinar. Good night and thank you.